Hey guys, RCAnime here. This is a story about a world with elves, dwarfs, and humans. A story where one race is slowly gaining dominance against the dwindling population of the others. This is a post-war world where its magic is winding down, even though some want to maintain the status quo. As time passes, the era of humans approaches. This is the story of Lord of the Rings. Tolkien's work founded the high fantasy genre, and now 70 years later, that genre has largely taken over anime. Isekai or traditional fantasy, they all work off the same template developed by Tolkien. And oftentimes, these works don't care to know that. Rather, it feels like most fantasy stories in anime and manga are being inspired solely by works that came out a few years before, and nothing else. This isn't inherently bad. Some anime in this genre have successfully used that inspiration to comment on the trend itself. But with all of these works taking inspiration from what feels like a closed bubble, all of it feels less like stories and more like content. Today, the worlds of most fantasy anime look and feel interchangeable. Looking at fantasy anime like this, it's clear the genre has lost its way. It's forgotten where high fantasy comes from, and what it was meant to intend for an audience in a world without magic. These worlds, despite their dragons, wizards, and heroes, are void of fantasy. It's less imagination and more repetition. But repeating the past doesn't always have to be uninspired.
If
Lord of the Rings is about a changing world through the lens of hobbits and men, Frieren does it through the lens of elves. The construction of elves in Middle-earth and Frieren are noticeably similar. They're almost immortal, and the luxury of time they have has largely shaped who they are as a species. While other fantasy anime have characters that are centuries old, their perception of time often doesn't feel dissimilar to our own. Their longevity doesn't play much of a role other than maybe being a punchline.
一体いくつだというのです
961歳になるわ。
900?
But in one episode of Frieren, we're immediately given a taste of how time is perceived by someone who practically lives forever. The episode begins with Frieren and her gang celebrating their defeat of the Demon King after a 10-year-long journey. During this celebration, her party reminisces about their time together, but Frieren makes this one comment.
短い間だったけどね。
短い？何を言ってるんだ？10年だぞ。ハイターを見ろ。すっかりおっさんになってしまったぞ。失礼ですよ。
At first, this is perceived as a joke, but a few minutes later, 50 years have passed. Frieren hasn't changed, but her friends are now nearing death. She returns to where they celebrated and is surprised to find out how much has changed. And a few more minutes later, her friend Himo passes away. And only at this point does Frieren realize how little time humans have. This episode is told completely from Frieren's point of view, not just as a narrator, but also with her perception of time. What felt like 23 minutes to her was a human's lifespan, and it allows the audience to understand how short Frieren's experience with a person is, compared to the time she has.
何のつもり？
見ての通り、私はもう長くはありません。フリーレン、フェルンを頼みましたよ。
This movement of time continues up until she meets and trains Fern. Through Fern, as Frieren desires to understand humans more, she slowly begins to empathize with their perception of time.
私一人の時間ってわけでもない。
Though, even if she understands that every day matters to humans, they're merely seconds for her.
もう少し探したら切り上げるよ。もう少しって何年ですか？
And if it weren't for Fern,
まあ時間なんていくらでもあるのか。
まあね。でもフェルンが嫌がるから早めに終わらせようか。
her behavior wouldn't change. Interestingly, the less Freyan appears in an episode, the slower time appears to move. Ultimately, it's because of the elves' lack of action, due to their unlimited time, that their race is slow with emotion, and is nearing extinction. Who they are is the reason for their downfall, and in some ways, mirroring the position of the elves in Middle-earth. Though elves begin to disappear in Freyan and Middle-earth for different reasons, their relationship with time is a factor. And with time, humans become more dominant. With the Demon King defeated before the events of the main timeline in Freyan, a majority of the show is set in the age of humans. The presence of humans versus any other race is acknowledged multiple times. The show itself primarily follows 3 points in time: the present, 100 years prior, and 1,000 years prior. The latter two are presented in flashbacks, and they actually paint the rise of humans. 1,000 years ago, there's only one human character primarily featured. 100 years ago, there's 2. However, in the present, almost all the characters are human. Through this progression of time, we can see humans go from being the minority, half the population, to now the majority. It's suggested that every race is fighting demons. Even Freyan's own party consisted of an elf, dwarf, and humans. However, in the present, humans are now the only ones who seem to be fighting demons, while most of the dwarves and elves seen at this time have retired or become pacifists. In a flashback 1,000 years ago, magic was primarily used by elves and demons.
人間の文化圏では今まで魔法は魔族の技術であるとして表立った研究は禁忌とされてきた。
And in the present, even that special skill has been overtaken by humans. There's one main reason why humanity has progressed so far, and it's a similar judgment from Tolkien's work. In the lore of Middle-earth, Iluvatar, who is basically God, gave humans the gift of mortality. The fact that humans live short lives has become the very factor to why they've progressed so far and quickly. Their short lifespan has made humans value every day compared to that of elves. In ways, both Tolkien and Freyan carry the idea that finite time is a gift, and not one to be wasted. What could take Freyan 30 years is a large percentage of Fern's life. There's no time for Fern to waste, and she imbues that obligation into Freyan. However, despite Freyan's attempts to learn about humans and empathize with their short lives, it doesn't change the fact that she will continue to live on long after Fern is gone.
弟子を取ったりはしないのか。
時間の無駄だからね。いろいろ教えてもすぐ死んじゃうでしょ。
Freyan is learning to live every day as if it's special, but ultimately, because of her lifespan, Fern's entire life will only feel like 23 minutes to Freyan.
みんなとの冒険だって私の人生の100分の1にも満たない。
With that perspective, to not be human almost feels like a curse.
Frieren、オレオールを探してヒンメルと話すんだ。
Freyan is mostly set a century after the Demon King was defeated. Her adventure with her party led them to the most northern point of the world. Their adventure ended and they parted ways. However, she decides to go on the same journey to the same destination. She retraces her footsteps from a century before, this time with new party members, both of whom were raised by her former friends. There's a lot of parallels in Freyan. where events in the present mirror those that happened a century or a millennium before, and as she gets closer to the Demon King's old castle in the north, she quickly finds out that something is brewing again between the humans and demons. It's unknown what's causing demons to rise from the shadows in numbers again, but whether if the Demon King was revived or a new leadership has appeared, this shady return feels much like that of Sauron's return in the Fellowship of the Ring. Even the diminishing number of mages as a result of relative peace in the present mirrors the diminishing of magic across Lord of the Rings. Even Frieren's new party, which is entirely made up of students from her original party, reflects the show's own learnings from Tolkien. But it's important to note that Frieren isn't a copy of Tolkien's work. There are so many aspects and creatures that are unique to Frieren, and the general tone of the series is very different. However, Frieren seems to be extremely familiar with its origins, utilizing some of Middle-earth's most intriguing ideas for itself. Unlike so many other fantasy anime these days, Frieren goes back to the source, and comes out with something new. It shows us how rich a series can feel when it takes inspiration and ideas from outside of a bubble. History repeats itself, but paradoxically, nothing happens the same way twice. As Frieren goes on her second adventure to the Demon King's castle, the journey itself is almost entirely different. The people she travels with are different, the obstacles are different, but they all occur under the shadow of what came before. Frieren trying to mirror her past adventure sometimes feels like a metaphor for the show's own attempts to mirror the ideas and events in Middle-earth. Frieren knows where it comes from, but is also walking its own path.
Hi, welcome to another edition of Between Two Ferns, the Oscar edition.
God, all you fucking care about is your goddamn show, man.
But all you care about is
fucking ferns. It's like all your fucking ferns, man. It's a fucking joke. I can't stand it.
Throw my ferns in my face!
In the lake, they save each other. They save each
It
other.
says on TV tropes.
Okay, how about you watch the show? How about you watch the show?